never buy the wrong type of home in Bremerton. It is rarely the cosmetic stuff that's going to get you. The hidden expenses that show up after your first winter here. Flood exposure that you didn't price correctly, drainage and slope issues that you didn't account for, condo HOAs that are one big repair away from a giant assessment. When you look at Bremerton and Kitsap County, a clear pattern starts to show up in terms of what kind of house is going to have what kind of problem. Which is why in this video, I'm breaking down the exact home styles that look like a deal online, but really turn out to be an expensive nightmare. The specific traps in this market, like flood mapping, landslide hazard, HOA reserve strength. I'm Cassandra Lopez with the Living in Bremerton channel. I've lived and worked in Kitsap County for the past 26 years, and I help buyers and sellers relocate all over Bremerton, Kitsap County, Silverdale, Port Orchard, Poulsbo, Seabeck, and all of the surrounding areas. So we're going to start talking about one of the most important ones that's often overlooked. Maybe you hadn't even considered it because you're not from this kind of area that has water on multiple sides, and that is flood insurance. Flooding can be a hazard here in Kitsap County. It's not as common as people might think, but you do need to take into consideration we are surrounded by water on, three sides. Kitsap County is a peninsula. So you have water on many sides, and that's just the Puget Sound. Internally, there are dozens of lakes, there are dozens of creeks and streams. So all of these properties are considered waterfront in one form or another. And with waterfront property comes some sort of flood hazard in one form or another. You're going to see those creeks swell and flood, and this may or may not pose a hazard if your property is far enough away from it. But if it's determined that the high water mark is now a risk to your property, your mortgage servicer may require you to have flood insurance. So FEMA has a great site where you can access the property in question, right? So you can punch in the address, it'll spit you out this really great map that shows you if the property is in a flood zone or not. And if it is in a flood zone, what kind of flood zone, because there's different delineations and types and 100 years and this sort of thing, right? So depending on if it's in a flood zone and what type of flood zone will determine what kind of flood insurance you may be required to carry. Now, this is something that it's important to budget for because flood insurance is typically more expensive than regular homeowners insurance. Flood insurance could make or break the deal for you. So if you have your heart set on this home and all of the financials pencil out, but then you find out you need flood insurance, well, now that is going to increase your monthly payment to a level that maybe you don't feel comfortable paying, or it bumps you out of your debt to income ratio or something like that, where you can no longer afford the house. Some common issues we see with homes that do have flooding issues. So it's normally going to be homes that have basements and or are on waterfront. So what we normally see in flooding basements is just your standard groundwater. We live in a lot of hills. There's a lot of aquifers. There's a lot of groundwater underneath, like coming up from the sound. I mean, granted, it's hundreds of feet down there, but that combined with the rain that we get can cause groundwater to start seeping into the basements. It'll find its way in little cracks and grooves, and any kind of compromise in that foundational wall, water will start to get in. And this is not uncommon. You see this very frequently when you're touring basements, and you can see a line like where the bricks are, but it does cause a damp basement. It could cause you to want to install a sump pump. Your nose knows. So if you step down into that basement and you smell like a damp, musky, kind of just moldy odor, then there's probably some sort of moisture in there. If you see that there's a running dehumidifier in the basement, that's like clue number 17 that there's water issues going on down there that the seller is clearly aware of. We need to find out from the seller what kind of flooding they've experienced during their ownership, and this would usually come in the form of the seller disclosure statement. There's a whole section on there about environmental and flooding and this sort of thing. Whatever the seller knows to be true and factual and a material condition about the home, they're required to disclose. So your home inspector should be able to see if there has been water present in the past or not, even if it's not currently there now. Another thing we can do is request that the seller share with us their flood insurance policy so we know what kind of coverage we may need for our own policy moving forward. And as I mentioned, we do have a lot of hills and stuff here. So if flooding is just like on your radar and you're freaked out and you're like, I don't even want to deal with it, let's try to find a home that's kind of like up the hill, like at the top of a hill. So that way the risk of flooding is super minimal. Not only will waterways and water bodies not swell to that level, but any kind of rain that we do get at the top of the hill will just drain right down to the bottoms. Okay, the second issue we're going to talk about is one that's super common here in the Pacific Northwest, and that is pest control. We live in the woods, you guys, so we're going to have what they call wood-destroying organisms. So those are going to be like your termites and your carpenter ants. Those are a thing here, though they're easily prevented and easily mitigated with the right kind of treatment. We just need to know what to look for up front. Along with pest control is mold, mildew, fungal growth, that sort of thing. That's super common that we see in crawl spaces. Now, we're not talking about black mold. We're not talking about something that's deadly like that, but it does need to be addressed and ideally removed from the property. And the cause of it needs to be mitigated. Usually the cause of mold and fungal growth in the crawl space or attic is going to be restricted ventilation. So we need to improve the ventilation to keep that air flowing through there and make things nice and dry. So if we're looking at a home that you absolutely love, it's the middle of the woods, even if it's not in the middle of the woods, if it's middle of town, this could still be a thing. But in the woods is more likely, right? Because, you're in their home and now they're going to be in your home. It's a reciprocal relationship. Just ask about pest control. We're going to ask about what kind of ongoing pest control the seller has had during their ownership. And during our home inspection, should be licensed, have an additional segment to their licensing, which is wood destroying organism inspector. In addition to doing your whole home inspection, analyze for wood destroying organisms and or fungal growth. Some of them can even test for it. It's an add-on service to the home inspection. So I'm going to tell you right now, 8 out of 10 homes that we see have some sort of pest infestation that the seller didn't even know about. It is that common. It is that prolific. And it's never a surprise when I see it on an inspection report. So if you're not from here and you are from somewhere that this is not an issue, don't want you to be alarmed when you see this, because this is one of those things that's super common, but it's also really easy to mitigate and really easy to prevent moving forward. So that said, it kind of makes it hard when you find the home of your dreams. You love the location, you love the school district, it's a great commute to work, like all these things, but now we find out it's got pests. We have to get rid of them and do like a quarterly ongoing treatment to make sure they don't come back. If you absolutely cannot stand the pest situation and you don't even want to deal with it, then maybe we look for something that's new construction, or we negotiate with the seller to have them make repairs prior to your ownership. And that way you can start with a nice clean new crawl space and attic and not even have to worry about it. Okay, our next issue that we're going to talk about is homes on septic systems. And while this is not an issue in and of itself, owning a home on a septic system is a whole other ball of wax than owning a home on like public sewer. So something unique to Kitsap County is that whenever a property that is on a septic system that is sold, transferred of ownership, the county requires at the health district level what's called a Kitsap County property conveyance report. And this is required if the property is on a septic and or a well, like a water well, like drinking water well. It is very uncommon to have a property that's on a well and on sewer. If you're on a well, you're likely on a septic. So the conveyance letter is good for a number of years, could be 1 year for an alternative system or 3 years for a standard system. And that varies case by case depending on what kind of septic system the property has. There's a couple of red flags when you're buying a home on a septic system. There's a few areas around here that are on septics that for whatever reason don't have any records. Like there's no drawing on file, there's no approved permit. There was a point in time, I think, where all of the media was getting shifted from handwritten everything to like maybe microfiche or whatever. And this was kind of like in the 40s and 50s. So while that does not prevent the sale of the property, it just kind of limits your knowledge as to exactly where the septic is and exactly what kind of design it is, if it's alternative or standard, exactly what kind of of maintenance has been done on it, this sort of thing. So that leads me into another point. Whereas you don't have a sewer bill, you are 100% responsible for the maintenance and care for your septic and replacing any failing parts and pieces and this sort of thing. So the thing with septic systems is usually they're fine until they're not. If you have ongoing maintenance and ongoing inspections, you will be well ahead of anything that needs to be replaced or repaired. But if you buy a house where the seller never had any maintenance done, like had it pumped once every 15 years or something ridiculous, and went way too long in between services, then you're going to just want to be very, very mindful and be very, very sure that you're buying a septic system that is healthy and in good shape and in good repairs so that you can avoid those really costly repairs or replacements in the future. Now, the next issue we're going to talk about involves sewer. Seems to be a great topic today, you guys. So the sewer line that belongs to you is what is from your home out to the city main in the road. So that is the homeowner's responsibility. Sometimes it'll cut off right at the property line, but other times the property line to the main is like no man's land. And so the county just says, that's the homeowner's because it comes from their house, So newer homes within like the last 10 years are probably totally fine. And to be honest with you, older than that is still going to be totally fine. But when you're buying a house, you can write into your inspection contingency that you have the opportunity to have the sewer scoped along with your home inspection to be part of your home inspection. I always recommend these. It's an add-on. It's an additional cost. It's like the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy to make sure that you're buying a property that has a decent sewer line, because you guys, you don't want to mess with this kind of issue if it goes wrong. Trust me. So why do we scope a sewer line in the first place? So if we are buying an older home, say 1960 or older, they used different materials back then. And they don't use those materials anymore for a reason. Like we see concrete pipes, we see clay pipes. So I've seen lines where from the house to the main, it's 4 different materials. From here to 6 feet, it's clay. From 6 feet to 10 feet, it's concrete. And then it goes to PVC or like whatever. So you can tell it's been repaired over the years or changed over the years because it's so different and incongruent. So we want to make sure that we're not inheriting all of these costs, and we do so very simply by adding on a sewer scope to our inspection report for a very nominal fee compared to what these big ticket items are going to cost you. So the tip of the day for the sewer is have it scoped, get any records from the seller. If they have had any repairs, that is when you would have records on file. So if they have any records of repairs, that'd be super helpful. The next type of home to not buy in Bremerton or Kitsap County are homes with unpermitted additions, unpermitted garages, unpermitted ADUs. This doesn't change the livability of the property. So if this is going to be your forever home and you don't care, then that's cool. When it comes up, it's going to now be an issue with the city or county, whoever's got jurisdiction, may require you to retroactively permit the project or the structure. Now, this doesn't sound as daunting as it seems. However, if you buy a house that had these things prior to your ownership, it should probably be the person who did it to get the retroactive permit. Like, you shouldn't have to pay for that. So if that's part of what we're looking at, if we find a home that we absolutely love, it's got an ADU for your mother-in-law, it's exactly what you're looking for. It's close to the shipyard, it's within walking distance to work, it checks all these boxes, but then we find out that the ADU was unpermitted, and now the city's going to make you retroactively permit the process. You can take that on if you want. That's your subjective jam. You can do whatever you want. If we are going to require the seller to do it, now we're on the city's timeline for permit approval. And if you've ever tried to get a permit from the city that's not an emergency, well, that's weeks and weeks and sometimes months to get that approved. And they send people out and they have them inspect it and they do this. And all of this is on their timeline, and they don't care at all about our contractual timelines for your purchase contract for that house. So this may be one of those things that if it's important enough to you, we go find something else, because there's no way the city permit process is going to fall within the timeline that you've agreed to with your seller to close on that house. Additionally, we want to question why these weren't permitted in the first place. Was the seller just being cheap? And to be fair, maybe it wasn't the seller. Maybe it was the owner before them. Like, we don't know, right? Where this comes up in the terms of your financing. So say you're getting a loan to buy your house and now it's being appraised. So the appraiser is going to calculate the square footage of the property, and they're going to say, hey, this square footage doesn't match the footage that's in the listing, because the listing maybe reflects all the unpermitted additions, right? And so the appraiser is going to say, I can only appraise this property based on the permitted square footage. So now this value is $450,000. Whereas your contract price is $500,000 because you're buying the whole house with the unpermitted footage, and you're going to use it. You're going to use that property. The house is that big, but the appraiser can now only value it based on the permitted square footage and what the county records show. So now that's a conflict. Now that's a discrepancy in your financing. Now somebody's got to come up with $50,000 so you can close on that house. Maybe the seller drops the price by $25,000 and you add $25,000 to your down payment. Maybe that kills the deal then and there, which is high likelihood. So that's where it could go wrong during the purchase process. And there is the worst case scenario that when you go to retroactively permit this structure or this addition, that the city or the county makes you tear it down because it's that out of code. That is the worst case scenario in your own. The next kind of property I would highly caution you about buying is a condo that has an HOA, because when you're buying a condo, you're not just buying your unit, you're buying all the community features as like common areas, right? So if there's a pool or a gym or a sauna or a clubhouse or any of these features like a dog park, these are all collectively owned features of the community that are co-owned by all of the condo owners, being able to use these things. And that's partly what the HOA dues go for. So an assessment, like a big project coming up, like say a condo community needs to re-side all the buildings and repave all the parking lots. Well, those are big, expensive jobs, and there may not be enough money in the reserves to cover the cost of all of that. So what the HOA is going to do is they'll pay for what they can out of the reserves, and then they will charge the homeowners the difference by increasing their monthly dues. So each condo association by state law is required to have a reserve study once a year. And when you're buying a condo in, that's got an HOA and it's going to have an HOA, a part of your due diligence when purchasing a condo is that you have an opportunity to review all of these documents. It's called a resale certificate. So the resale certificate is going to contain the budget, the most recent budget. It's going to contain the master insurance policy for the whole community. I'm actually closing one of those right now where my home buyer is getting a great deal, but the home seller is writing a check for $30,000 just to sell their property because he bought at a time where the assessments weren't what they are, and now they are what they are, and now the value of his property went way down to account for that. And unfortunately, that's just how it goes sometimes. His options are to either sell it or hold on to it until the assessment's paid off, and then he can sell it for then market value. But his life circumstances, he's got to move on, so he has no choice. Now, if those assessments are not in line with what your financing conditions are determined, then that's a problem too, because then you can't get your financing. So now we're limiting buyers' ability to finance the property. So if a buyer can't finance, then maybe now we're looking at cash-only buyers, and that's really going to restrict your buyer pool. So these assessments can have huge implications on the ability to sell one of these condos and your ability to buy one. So, it's double whammy. Okay, so our tips for buying into a condo is we want to make sure we're evaluating the HOA super, super clearly. And if you've never purchased a condo and you don't know what you're reading because all of it looks the same and it makes your eyes bleed, just let me know. I can help you out. And the lender knows what they're looking for as well. So between all of us, we can show you the big picture, be like, okay, this is what they have. These are the projects they have slated. Here's how much it's going to cost. And here's what their impending assessments are going to be. If that's something you feel like you're okay with, then we can move forward. If not, then we can terminate, move on, find something else. And the last property we're going to talk about that you should never buy is one with electrical issues. So we have a ton of old houses around here. I mean, we have houses that are 125 years old and more, and old houses are still around for a reason because they just don't build them like they used to. But they also contain structures and features that we also don't use anymore for a reason. There's a reason that knob and tube wiring is not a thing anymore. So oftentimes what we see in these older homes, they will have had knob and tube wiring at some point, when it was built and this sort of thing. They didn't have electrical clothes dryers. They didn't have electrical stoves and ranges that needed, these 220s and these really big, powerful circuits. All they had was like lights. That's basically all they used their wiring for. And for voltage things like that, knob and tube can be fine, but the reason we don't use it anymore is because it can be overloaded very easily and be a fire risk. So they stopped putting it in houses probably in the 40s, 50s was kind of around when they stopped using it completely. So when we're buying an older home, there's lots of things that we need to kind of be alerted to, okay? Wiring is definitely one of them. So if we see that there's evidence of knob and tube wiring, but it's inactive, that just means that at some point there was knob and tube and they abandoned it and they rewired the house with, modern wiring, but they left the knob and tube in there because it's kind of a pain to remove all of it. So they just left it. They just deaded the circuits and left it there, right? So that's not an alarming situation. Another really red flag that I see that goes along with the wiring is the panel. So if the panel is a Federal Pacific or a Zinsco panel, we need to have the seller replace that right away. Those have been out of commission for decades, and there's a reason why. Also fire risk hazards like just spontaneous combustion and all this stuff. So Federal Pacific, I don't see Zinsco panels as often, and Federal Pacific I see maybe one a year. I'm really surprised that they're even still in homes, but they're around. So highly, highly recommend we negotiate for a replacement on that or a credit for repair so you can have it done immediately after closing. You do not have to rewire the whole house to replace the panel. You can use the existing wiring with a new panel. That's totally a thing. Very cost-effective thing as well. Some things you want to look out for during your inspection are switches that don't work, lights that are flickering, switches that are kind of loose, outlets that are two-prong outlets. That means there's likely not a ground in the house. There was a solution for non-grounded houses to be grounded. They literally just put a stake in the ground. That's our ground, tied a wire to it and wired it into some main wire to the house, right? So you still have the two-prong outlets, but now you have a ground outside. So technically the home is grounded, but if you're looking at one of these older homes with all of its charm and really nice curb appeal, in addition to your home inspection, I would also advise maybe getting a secondary electrician out there to really get eyes on the situation to see that everything's put together correctly and functioning correctly. So if you're moving to Bremerton or anywhere in Kitsap County and you want to pressure test some of these things we talked about today with some of these older homes with wiring issues or flooding issues, or maybe making sure the septic or sewer is healthy, reach out to me for a quick call. I can help you identify what's in a flood zone, if there are proper records for everything we talked about, so that you can make sure that you're buying a nice, safe, sound home. I'm Cassandra Lopez with the Living in Bremerton channel, and I help buyers and sellers all over Kitsap County. And now I'll tell you the truth about what homeownership will feel like here in the Pacific Northwest, so you can buy with confidence and protect your long-term value. See you on the channel.